Good evening and welcome to a brand new episode of Freewheeling. I am Siddharth Vinayak Partnkar, and with me today is a very special guest all the way from the UK. I am being joined by Julian Thomson, who is Design Director at Jaguar. And there he is, all set. Julian, it's wonderful to see you. Good evening and good morning to where you are right now. Wonderful to
Yeah,
have you.
hello. Great to be here. Great to join you. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. And I think I've been wanting to do this for a while and have you on the show. So it's really great that you gave us the time today. And we're very happy to see you.
Good, good.
All right. So I'm going to jump straight into it, as it were.
Okay.
The current situation, we've talked about it sort of ad nauseum now, and I know everybody has an opinion on where things are going or how things are going to open up. But that notwithstanding, I think let's just talk about what it's been like for you. I mean, personally and both professionally and personally, what has this period been like? What has it taught you? What has it, maybe allowed you to discover?
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's a big question there. I guess going back about a few months, I took over from my previous design director, Ian Callum,
Yes.
last July. It's coming up to nearly a year now. We moved into a new studio, which you saw, um, and we were starting to build up a real burst of energy looking at Jaguar. I think following Ian's departure, it wasn't necessarily that we wanted to do everything differently, but it was a chance for us really to have a fresh look at the Jaguar brand and its design language. And we had a fantastic new facility. We believe it's one of the best studios in the UK, or
Yes.
in the world, in fact. And so a lot of excitement, a lot of pent-up energy, and really, if I go back to sort of January, February, a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. The place was really starting to come alive. And suddenly this terrible pandemic
Yeah.
hits us, and we have to leave an area which should really become our second home, an area we are really fond of. And, you get very attached to your design proposals, your design models, and the team working with them. Suddenly that all had to disappear. And we had to retreat back to our homes and carry on. And we've been managing to carry on fairly well, really, at home. Technology-wise, we've been meeting up regularly, seeing people. All the design software we use, be it 2D or 3D, we can still continue to review. We still review CAD data online, 3D data. We review clay models from our studio in China online, so we can do most things. I'm surprised myself. I'm not a guy who likes to spend all day at his computer, but I surprise myself how effective we can be. But having said all of that, good design is about collaboration. It's about closeness. It's about those friendships and those working arrangements you have with people. And you can still do those on Skype or whatever like that, but it's not really the same. And so, I do miss the studio, and I'm aching to get back to it. In terms of what we've learnt, I think we've been forced to step back from our everyday work. Whichever way you look at it, you've been forced to just stop, take stock, and that can be quite a refreshing thing as well. You have the time to suddenly step back from it all. You don't have that routine of getting up in the morning and rushing to work and finding a parking space and getting a cup of coffee. You can stop all of that, and you can think, hey, why was I doing that? What was the point? What am I trying to achieve? And at the same time, with this threat of COVID-19 going around, I think everyone's reevaluating, their priorities in life, whether it's work, money, friendship, friends, health. Everyone's thinking differently about those things.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a good opportunity for us to think about really going back to the start and really think about what we're about and why we're doing and what is our purpose in our world, and in a smaller area. What's the Jaguar brand all about? Why does it deserve to be here? And why does it deserve to be in a future world? And how can we really help and enrich people's lives in this new world going forward?
No, that's actually great because you're right. This whole, reevaluating and reassessing where things stand, that can give you a great new perspective. But tell me, I mean, from a design or a designer's perspective, what's the one thing that you miss the most? Is it the clay modeling? I mean, when you say you prefer to be in the studio, what's that one thing which you know you can't do from home?
But like I said, I was never one for being on a computer.
Yeah.
Just never. It wasn't really. It wasn't. It wasn't me. I had a beautiful office at work. You know, huge glass windows, big meeting room, a big AV experience. You know, all of that stuff. But I was never in there because I just liked walking around, talking to people. Our new studio was really much built around the idea that everyone could talk and collaborate together.
Yeah.
And when you're doing a vehicle like a Jaguar, you wanted to make it look like something that's very spontaneous and very artistic, something that's been, you know, created by a genius in a few pen strokes. You know, that's what you want, that burst of energy. You want that human touch, a bit of humanity, that love and craftsmanship that goes into its creation. You want to make it look like it's done by one person in a morning, you know. And so the key to it, you know, we have 300 people in design, and they all work very hard over probably a 3-year period to release a car design. But you want to make it look like it's done by one person in a couple of hours. You want that, you know, that emotional connection with that product. So that means, you know, our whole studio was built around communication and friendliness and warmth and making everyone approachable. So I'd spend most of my days just walking around, seeing what people are drawing, seeing what people are trimming, looking at engineering layouts, looking at clay models. I would just walk around, and if I had a question about something, if I looked at something and with a clay modeler and I thought, well, that bonnet doesn't look right, I'd just walk over to the guy over there and I'd say, hey, what's happening over there? And he'd come over and look at it, and, you know, and it was like that. And it was a very exciting environment, a very one where you had instant response to everything, and with a lot of momentum. And so that's what I really miss. I you know, it's working. We're still, you know, creating great cars, but, you know, I miss that joint burst of energy shared amongst several people.
And you know, having seen the new design center, I can relate to what you're talking about. A lot of open spaces, everybody sort of working in a very collaborative way. I remember that, and even between the sort of various departments, no big walls. You know, everything was sort of open and fluid. So
Absolutely.
it's all coming back to me as you were sort of talking about it. You know, a lot of what you said is also what we used to hear from Ian in the past. You know, about just the simplicity of being very, very sort of true to what a Jaguar has to be. And we've seen that little sort of shift away from being, you know, just designing beautiful cars to designing cars that all sort of belong to this family. It's been very evident in some of the work that you've been doing. Even some of the concept cars that you did. That's when I guess, you know, the CX-75, for example, it's one car where you really sort of saw that come to life the first time. Talk us through that. I mean, some of the specific cars that maybe you worked on as well over this last, you know, decade or so, where we've seen really stellar, good-looking, very popular products coming from Jaguar.
Yeah, I mean, I joined Jaguar only 6 months after Ian Callum in 90.
I know you both worked really closely, yeah.
Yeah, and I've always run advanced design. So I've always run the first part of the project. So every single Jaguar we've done, be it a concept car or production car, had started with my team then, and it's grown. And over the years, I've sort of grown my level of responsibility up to sort of taking over. So it's been a very organic process. And, you know, we've gone through different phases. You know, when we started in 2000, you know, the brand was in a very sort of retro phase. Yeah. You know, and our job there was to really drag it into the present day, very sort of contemporary products. And we did a lot of very controversial things which weren't liked by the management at the time. So vehicles, our concept cars like the R Coupe and the RD6, you know, they weren't liked at all by our management then, you know, because they were so set in their ways. It was very much a company which had a very respected and very well understood set of design values, but they were just stopped. And so we had to really bring them forward. Over the years, we've introduced various cars, the first XK, the next XF, the XJ, and we've transitioned to a more modern contemporary brand while still trying to keep hold of, all the special features of a Jaguar. And then the concept cars, the concept cars are always something for us to really have a bit of fun with, really extend, almost like turn the dial up to 11 to do something very, very special. They have a more realistic function as well, in that they do push both the design teams, but also the management within the company, but also the public to really stretch their thought about what our brand could become. And the CX-75 you mentioned, that was done as an anniversary car for 75 years of Jaguar. And we wanted to create something which is really a car which really was about the best a Jaguar could possibly be. And it was really created as a bit of an abstract, if you like, initially, just as an abstract form, to say that a Jaguar should be about balance, purity, and muscles. So the cabin was very, very central within the car, and had the wheel arches and four corners, sort of an equal level of prominence around the vehicle. And then we engineered a special hybrid solution into the car based around a turbine to basically fit inside that package, because what was really important was we created an optimized form language for the car. Because if you want to do really the best possible job for a sporting vehicle, proportions are key to that. For that vehicle, that's what we tried to do. We fitted the engineering in afterwards, if you like, which is not really what you'd normally do with a car, but that's how we did it.
But the reason I brought that car up is I think it's also a car that sort of evoked a lot of emotion. On the one hand, it was a Jaguar, and on the other hand, it was also pointing very clearly in a very future-looking direction of where the brand could go, and also the kind of boundaries it could push. And then we saw the same philosophy carry through to all your more recent vehicles, like the F-Pace or even the I-Pace. I mean, that's been, of course, a whole new thing again. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the I-Pace, unusually, that's a totally different car to the CX-75.
Oh, yeah.
If you actually look at the construct of the lines and the sculpture, that's what we did. So we actually started with the CX-75 as a form language, if you will, and we manipulated that into what became the I-Pace. It's a totally different car, but if you look at the fender shapes, particularly, and how the whole car is constructed, there's a lot of CX-75 in the I-Pace. It's not deliberate, it's not there so people think it looks like a CX-75, but it was taking what we'd considered the optimized Jaguar at the time and putting it into a different type of vehicle. And that's really, the ways some designs happen and how they happen almost by accident in some ways. These things are great in a design studio, and we encourage different ways of thinking, things which are disruptive and quite challenging in the studio. That's how great design often happens, by some of these happy accidents, if you like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing you were talking about at the time when you joined the company, and then the sort of transition that we've seen, take me back to that time, because the way I understand it, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you want to sort of explain it to me a little bit better. There were certain constraints. I mean, there was a lot of the Ford lineage. There was, certain platforms that you had to use, the kind of trim and material, and also, like you said, the management being very focused on what they assumed the brand should be. The change that we've seen since, it seems almost like, whether it's the aluminum architecture or whether it is, the kind of freedom of the design expression, it seems that it's a little more unbridled. It's a little bit more sort of, it's not hemmed in any way. Is that a correct assessment? I mean, would you say that having that go away in a sense with Tata was a great thing for the brand?
Yeah, I think it's the same we get in a lot of brands. Jaguar is one of the most famous, most historic brands. And if you look at Jaguar in the 90s, even going back to the 70s and 80s, it was a very well-loved brand, and it had a certain look and feel about it, which was very exceptional. Obviously, Jaguar's values, through the invention of Jaguar in the 50s and 60s, were all about innovation, elegance, beauty, and luxury. And the XJ6 really was a very pivotal car because it really redefined the sports saloon at the time. The trouble with that car really was it was a victim of its own success. At the same time, we started to sell a lot of saloon cars in America through the 70s into the 80s. And, we started to get a very powerful set of people selling these cars, a dealer lobby, and some very passionate customers who really begged us not to change the car. They loved the car so much. In terms of brand recognition in the 80s and 90s, Jaguar is one of the strongest, most unique cars that everyone recognized. But it did mean that it got, over the years, going from cars which are really revolutionary, like the E-Type and the XJ6 itself and the Mark II, these cars which really put down some very strong place markers in design history. Suddenly, the XJ6 virtually stayed the same looking car from 1968 through to 2003, 2004. Simply because that's what people love that car so much. And so we went from being a company in this establishment, which became truly revolutionary in terms of its design, to one which was completely rearward looking. And so that's what we had to address when we came in. And I think when Tata came in and bought us, they still had a very romantic vision about Jaguar and what it should be and what it's about. But they clearly understood that it couldn't stay there. It needed to modernize. It needed more cars. It wanted to have a better relevance. And so, there's a fondness for some of the old stuff. We still need to keep moving on as well. So it's always a big issue about whether your legacy and your heritage is your biggest asset or something that anchors you to the past and stops you going forward. And how you balance it out and how you play with it is really, really tricky. I feel now because we've swung full back the other way into more contemporary products now. We've entered a lot of new segments successfully, be it SUVs and electric cars with the I-Pace. Now perhaps is the opportunity to celebrate Jaguar a bit more, celebrate some of that tradition, but in a very modern fashion. So going forward into the future, I would like our cars to really speak to that legacy and that look and that identity more than they have. They are doing at present.
That's actually exciting. I mean, I'm getting excited hearing that because it's really the thing that I love to look to. I mean, design for me becomes this very exciting area to always focus on. Still want to just dwell on one thing from the past before we talk about what's going to happen in the future. That moment then where you went to doing the first XF or when the XF was first coming out. It was also, I mean, when it came to market was coincidentally around the time when the change of ownership happened, but obviously the process had begun earlier internally. How exciting was it to look at that car in such a fresh way for you and the team?
Yeah, I mean it's very, very exciting for us. It's you don't get that chance very often, really. If you look at cars through time, and if you take another brand like a BMW or an Audi, and you look at an Audi A6, it's a very straightforward progression from one to the other. You can put them in order. You can see elements which are always there and gently progress, and they're all very modern, very contemporary cars. If you think of the jump we took from the previous generation Jaguar S-Type to the Jaguar XF, that doesn't happen very often. That hardly ever happens, So that's a great thing to be able to do. There's an element of fixing the brand, fixing the design language. It had to be done. But for anyone to given that chance to just reinvent the brand overnight like that, that's a fantastic thing to be able to do. And that's in a strange way. That's how William Lyons wanted to do it when he, did cars before. He went from the Jaguar XK 120 to the E-Type. An enormous leap, In that car, there's only 7 years between those two cars, and it's an enormous leap between one to the other. Our transitions have taken longer, but it's great to be able to do that and reassess the brand and move it forward like that.
I'm pretty obsessed with E-Type, as you can see. So,
Yeah.
hearing E-Type just, my face will light up. But, um, the reason why I wanted to sort of understand that from you and hear that from you is because it helps us to also focus or get a better understanding of where you're also going. I think the I-Pace, in many ways, of course, a triple winner for us at the World Car Awards as well, which we were very thrilled about. And it also won for design. I mean, a lot of people saw it as
Yeah.
this progressive, modern electric vehicle, but at the same time,
Yeah.
the fact that it's almost not just clutter breaking, but mold breaking design in many ways is
Yeah.
also something that was recognized by the international jury. Um what was that moment like for you and as a team? Because it was obviously a big historic thing that happened, and you know, the fact that it was the I-Pace, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's it's a car which almost slipped under the radar, for us in terms of development terms. It was a project which sort of grew in the background, and it was always a little bit of an outlier. And sometimes you need those vehicles. You need those vehicles which are, take a few risks, try to move the game on, that. It's very difficult to do in this modern world when there's so much at stake in terms of financial investment in these vehicles. To actually take that sort of risk is difficult. It's difficult to actually, change something so radically. But, that's very much what we did with that car. And it was so exciting to be able to do something like that, to really pull the covers off something which was totally unexpected. If you think at the same time, we knew that Mercedes was doing their electric car and Audi was doing
Yeah.
the first e-tron. Both those cars were very, very conservative in terms of what they did. They both used very, very conventional layouts with long bonnets, and they were just adaptations of cars. And here was Jaguar coming along before those guys, getting their car onto the market first, with a much, much more ambitious solution. So that felt really, really good, to see that we'd really gone out there and we delivered what we said we would. So that was a fantastic feeling, and the car still looks really fresh now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're very, very pleased with that car and how it's actually rewritten. And Jaguars have always been honest to their engineering. They haven't tried to hide what's underneath them. So that's the fact we used the new powertrain, all the different packaging restraints were sort of, some of them were gone, other ones were introduced, but we had a fresh eye and everything like that. Every designer wants to do that. A designer doesn't want to hear, okay, we're going to do a new version of this, and can you do it a bit like before, but put a bigger boot on it? The designer doesn't want to hear that.
Yeah.
He wants to know, here's a clean sheet of
Fresh,
paper,
yeah, sheet
do
of
what you
paper.
want.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. And the reason why I think for many of us the I-Pace became that breath of fresh air is because, like you said, the conventional rules didn't apply. You didn't have to have certain kind of architecture that has to be a certain way. I mean, some of the other cars you mentioned, they all started out with that conventional layout because they used existing platforms. Unlike you,
Yeah.
where you completely went in a new direction. How does that set you up now for future electric and maybe electrified vehicles, whether it's a hybrid or anything else, or maybe even one with an ICE engine? But how does that set you up in terms of the understanding, the experience, the capability that you now have?
Yeah, I think we're a great believer in electric cars, as you know. We're going to be electrifying in some form or other all our future vehicles from now on. We'll have some degree of electrification. I guess, the transition to electric cars and how quickly it happens is very, very difficult for the industry to really to cope with, because it's different depending on people's tastes. It's different depending on people's confidence, and probably the most challenging thing is really legislation restrictions globally. Different attitudes. You've seen the price of oil falling away in the last few months, and the resurgence of conventional cars in the States because of the political situation as well there. And so things we thought were going to happen quicker than they are happening. In some areas have been delayed, and then some areas are adopting electric cars quicker than we thought that they might. But it's really difficult because you can't just make cars which do everything. You have to make a bet on what's happening in the market. Unusually fortunately for us in the UK, in April, when the car market pretty much dried up, the second best selling car in the UK was actually the Jaguar I-Pace. Because in this COVID time where everyone's stressing out about, health and well-being, if they were going to buy a car, they wanted a car which made a very strong statement about cleanliness and health and less pollution. And so the I-Pace did very well against a very harsh, threatening external environment. So I hope electric cars are adopted very, very quickly. They're obviously victims of infrastructure as well, which is down to local governments as well. But I think they are a good solution. I think they provide a very good driving experience. We've made no secret that the next XJ will only be available as an electric car. And when you talk about electric luxury cars, electric cars bring you great refinement, a lot of very, very instant power, which is totally silent. They're very, very clean. They have no pollution. They don't emit no CO2. So they're very good for urban environments. A lot of these limousines are used purely in an urban environment, as you know. And so as a type of vehicle, luxury sedans, are very well suited to electric cars. And Jaguars, where you want this velvety smooth but huge amount of power and absolute serenity and tranquility in how it goes forward, that they really do suit electric very well indeed. So we think there's a big future for that. I think we need to see more work on electric sports cars. I think, the fact that to get more power, you need more weight, and weight is the opposite of agility often. So we have a bit more work to think about what electric sports cars might mean if we're talking about ultimate performance. That's something we're very interested in, and we've got lots of good ideas about that going forward.
I'm actually really excited by what you just said, and to be fair, I think everybody kind of expects that. The fact that you have made some bold statements, not just in terms of what you've said as a company, but also with the products like the I-Pace and then the declaration on the XJ. Before we start talking about that, though, the XJ itself, many people have been waiting for a long time to see more about it, and I understand you can't share specific details, but if you look at that project from the time it first started, it's coming off of a previous generation car that's already been successful, was also considered extremely good looking. What was the sort of direction that you wanted to take this car into, the nameplate?
I can't talk too much about it, but I will say that XJ, in its original form, going right back to 1968, took a different path to other, what we call known as F segment type cars. F segment is 7 Series, S Class, Audi A8. It took a different path to luxury cars at the time, something which was much more personal, so much more about driving experience, and more of a tasteful, intellectual spin on luxury. And that's what Jaguar is about. It's more of a personal connection to that car, something which you really, the person who owns the car really connects with. You can sit in the back of a new Jaguar XJ and enjoy it thoroughly, but equally you'll enjoy it probably more if you drive the thing as well, and that's what makes Jaguars unique and so special. I think we're not about trying to do a big show-off, in-your-face car. We are about something which is slightly understated, which really respects the choice of the driver and his tastes and his knowledge as well. And so the Jaguar always tries to connect in a more emotional level in that respect. So it does try to rewrite the rule book, and I feel very successfully in it. It's not your typical 3-box luxury sedan. That's not what we want to do. I don't think that type of car is right for the future, and it's certainly not right for Jaguar.
I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to drive it, and that's true of I think all the new cars that you'd be doing in any case. But yeah, this one is going to be special. The fact that it is all electric also gives you more freedom to be able to explore into this uncharted new direction that you believe the XJ needs to go in.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does. I think we're still learning about electric cars and how we package them, because there certainly are things that they can do which are different. They does you don't have a traditional bonnet, but then you do have a huge slab of batteries between the wheels, which means you have a long wheelbase, and the people have to sit a bit higher. Jaguars have always traditionally been very, very low, sleek cars, and so we've worked very, very hard to make sure we optimize proportions. We're very, very pleased with the silhouette of the car now and how it looks. But that was difficult to get, to take that new packaging criteria to successfully. And then there are all the other things, like electric cars are heavier than ICE cars in a whole, and so the crash strategy has to be different as well. So how the front structure of the car has to be different as well. So there are different challenges, and we don't quite have that flexibility we perhaps first thought we were going to have with electric cars. There's a lot of big components going into these vehicles.
Yeah, of course, and I think it's quite fascinating seeing how it's evolving, because a lot of that evolution is also happening in a much shorter span of time, and so it's exciting from our perspective to see how that comes to us. What you mentioned earlier got me really excited, of course, about the potential with electric and sports cars. Now, being sporty is one thing when it's sort of just a label that gets used and abused very often in our industry. But with Jaguars, it's a no-brainer. It's a given. It's something that people won't even think twice about. That the vehicles will represent some form of sportiness, regardless of body style and size. But when you talk about going to the heart of that, like what happened with the F-Type, or even previous cars like the XK, that becomes even more exciting, because now we are starting to see how electric can actually, and this is across the industry, we're seeing how electric can truly also equal exhilaration. As Jaguar, do we, can we say that it's almost like a double expectation then, that you will be the forefront of that?
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to stop doing sports cars. Sports cars are really, key to everything we do. Jaguar has one of the best possible history books, if you like, about sports cars right up to the present day with the F-Type. It's key to everything we do, and it's almost like what every Jaguar wants to grow up one day to be. It wants to be a sports car, And I think for our customers and people buy our cars, we know you can't drive at 200 miles an hour. We know that to be really realistic, a sports car probably can't get to your destination any quicker than an SUV, and all those sort of things. But they still represent that dream of motoring. They all represent the best of what you're trying to do, and a connection with that object and what it can potentially do is very important. You may have an F-Type, and you may only 2 or 3 times in its lifetime really get to the limits of what it can do, but you always have that potential. It's the same if you buy when you go out for a cold walk, you buy a jacket which is suitable for climbing up Everest. You don't buy one which is can just do the job. You always want some association with buying the very best and knowing that you're an expert in that field and what you do. So they always represent something special. I think what's difficult about performance cars and relating to electric cars is when people buy cars just on pure numbers. When they buy them on brake horsepower figures, buy them on acceleration figures or Nürburgring lap times, those really take you down a path of characteristics of the car you probably will never really approach or never be able to really use, and they might actually destroy the driving experience. How a car is on a day-to-day basis. The suspension may be too harsh, the car could be too heavy, too powerful, too expensive. So I think a sports car really needs to connect with what you can really use and what you can really enjoy. So you've got to get that balance right. You've got to just avoid just getting into sheer horsepower numbers. No one needs a 2,000 horsepower electric car, and no one. I'm sure if you experienced that, it'd be really unpleasant. Okay, if you can rent out a runway or something like that, and you put on some fireproof clothing and the rest of it, and you don't eat for 6 hours beforehand, maybe you can experience that. But I don't think that's when things got ridiculous. We're just talking about 0 to 60 numbers, So I think our job is to do cars you can really connect with, really, really enjoy. Jaguar is all about a unique experience in the journey, and it's got to be accessible as well. So electric has still got something to prove. It can give you instant torque. That's good. It can, with computer systems, with torque vectoring, it can give you fantastic grip and do absolutely fabulous things. There's no doubt about that. But we're talking really at the edge of things which really can exploit at the racetrack as well. So some of the things it might take away, more of that visceral approach, the noise, the smell, the interaction, the vibration, if that's missing, what do you replace it with? So we're still really working on what a sports car experience can be. I think the I-Pace is a very, very sporty car.
Yeah.
It's very, very fast. It's good fun to drive. It starts to, it's not set up to be a sports car, but it is almost drives like a sports car. But it starts to give you some little direction about how you can do something which is very agile, very fun, and very reactive at the same time. So we're still working on this. I believe, electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, advanced hybrid vehicles, can add a lot to the driving experience, but we're still working exactly on what that is.
I remember being very surprised by the kind of performance that we had on the I-Pace when I drove the car. All of us, we got a chance to drive it at the Algarve track, and it was phenomenal. It was a great drive. So yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, very agile and very reactive. It's good fun.
It is, and kind of more direct than you expect it to be.
Yeah, we didn't design that as a sports car. So imagine we took that technology, we actually designed it to be a sports car. It'd be something truly special.
Which is why I was asking you, and yeah, that's the reason why it excites me to know that you're going to still try and sort of blend those two realms of what a sports car should be, as you see it. The reason why I think I've gone down this path of conversation is also because I can't remember what year it was, but I remember seeing you once at the Gaydon test track. Now, of course, there's the Fen End facility as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Very nice track. But you do like getting out on the track. I mean, we don't often see the design team or designers being behind the wheel as often, or even at the the top end of the performance spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I do like driving. I've always liked driving. I'm probably from a generation that's just real petrol heads. You get some car designers now who are very, very good, and they're into design. They're into car design, but they're not drivers. But certainly, my era, growing up in the 80s, that was an exciting time for performance cars and I've always been into cars. I've always been into driving. I worked at Lotus for 11 years earlier, and it's obviously a company that's obsessed with driving. It's obsessed with driving and obsessed with handling, and so that stuck with me through all this time. And I don't know about you, but through this lockdown period, I'm really missing driving. And last weekend I went out in 4 or 5 different cars and just to drive, and I just like driving. So it's very important that this interaction, and that's what Jaguars are about. They are really about involving. You have to have that connection somehow with the vehicle.
I must tell you, Julian, that here in India we've had a more severe lockdown, and it's coming around to being almost 70 days now that I haven't driven.
Oh, really?
So you can imagine I'm starting to, I think, shake now. I really need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got back in that car the other day and I haven't driven very much. And I couldn't believe how fast cars were. They seem so fast. And then I hadn't been on a highway for maybe 7 weeks, like on a motorway, and I suddenly found myself, I think, wow, I'm just going so fast. I'm traveling such large distances suddenly because I've been confined to the local area. So I think I hope people will drive for the right reasons in the future. I hope they appreciate, cleaner air and lack of congestion. But when they do take a journey, I hope they really savor it.
Oh yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think maybe now we can appreciate it a little bit more, perhaps, with some more perspective on it, as we've all been sort of compelled to get. The conversation about the Lotus Elise was something I was going to have with you anyway. You mentioned your years at Lotus. Not everybody gets to work with a brand like that, which is not just niche but also almost hallowed in some ways, and people, you don't always get to see one on the road. Many people haven't seen a Lotus ever on the road, for example, certainly not in these parts. What was that like? I mean, to be able to, put your name to a car like the Elise.
I think the when you design a car, you get the best possible results
Hmm.
if you're designing a car for yourself. If you really, at the point in time when you're designing a car and you really believe that's the car you want and you know best, and then if you're fortunate enough to find some like-minded people, and it was my best friend Richard Rackham who did the chassis, and you do that together, and then someone just gives you the ability, the tools, the money, the brand, it doesn't get any better than that. So come together with friends and design a car for you guys, you know, is the ultimate.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do an Elise now because, my back is too stiff. I'm not as flexible as I used to. I'd find it too harsh. I'd find it too compromised. And I drove my Elise day before yesterday, and I still like it, but I look at it, it's a little bit ridiculous now when I look at it. I couldn't design a car like that now, but at the time that was what I really truly believed in, and luckily we found several thousand people who shared that view as well. And also I think we had a point in time where that company was before the Elise in a bit of a poor position. People had lost belief in it, didn't really know where to take it. And so you just got the people who really, really wanted to do that car come together. The people who would, when other people had given up on it, you got the people who really thought there was something there. So a small team of people with a real passion, designing something for themselves, and given the keys to the treasure box of Lotus, given the responsibility to do that, it's fantastic. And we've had the same opportunity with Jaguar as well, myself and Ian Callum. We've gone in there, and there's a couple of car geeks like myself and Ian saying, come on, here it is, it's yours now, sort it out, and that's the ultimate dream for any car designer.
Oh, very special. Yeah, absolutely. And when you talked about some of that, it was really nice. I almost had goosebumps, sort of thinking of what it would have been like at that point for you. Today,
Yeah.
as you know, when you mentioned that it's almost coming around to a year now since Ian left, and of course you have now taken full charge of the entire design department. It's an unfair question and a perhaps cliched one, and maybe one that should have come at the end of this interview, but I'll still ask this anyway. What's that one thing that you would like to see as your stamp or your contribution to Jaguar?
Um,
We'll look back at this
I,
answer, a few years down the line. I'll remind you of what you said.
you know, if you look at we study Jaguar history a lot. It's a prerequisite of the job that you respect that history. I'm only
For
the
sure.
third Jaguar design director in history.
Mm.
And so I have to respect that history. And I look back at its golden moments, and in folklore of car design, the whole story about how they released a Jaguar E-Type at Geneva and how it blew everyone away, and that Enzo Ferrari saw it and said it's the most beautiful car I'd ever
Yeah.
seen. And here was a car which cost about the same as a Porsche 356, but went almost twice as fast.
Mm.
Can you imagine bringing out a car like that today? Something that looked literally like a spaceship, was uncomparable to anything else, and just rewrote the whole rule book. That's what I'd like to do. I want to do something that significant. Now that target is astronomical, but that's really what every car designer should aim to do something as groundbreaking as that. It's really difficult in a competitive world. So many products, so many good designers, so many good car companies. But if I could create half the excitement of that E-Type did, and to really think about how that car changed people's perception of transport, that's an ultimate ambition. I'd love to be part of it. I would like to be safe in the knowledge that I can add to the story of such great achievements through Jaguar's history. That's what I'd really like to be able to do.
And it's great that it's all happening at a time when there are so many transitions. It's not just about materials or regulations, but even
Yeah,
the engine types. There's so much that's
yeah,
sort of changing. That
Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting stuff, I'm
Yeah, and
sure.
it's a very difficult time for the industry, but it's a very creative time, and the people who are creative will win out, I hope.
I do too, and um, the point about what then comes from Jaguar going forward. I know we spoke about the XJ, that's very immediate, but the overall expectation is that the cars will not just be sporty and everything else that you expect, but they'll also be really pretty, very attractive, very almost sort of trend-defining products. Um, Again, an unfair question, but does that put a whole lot of pressure on you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have a reputation for designing the most beautiful cars in the world. That was what we've always been about, the aesthetic. About beauty and luxury and power. And we had to stay there. That's where people come to our brand. And I think we need to have a stronger identity, a stronger look. That we have. We do cars which are truly individual, like the best of our vehicles in history. And we'll never do something weird or quirky or different just to wanting to be different. We'll always be grounded in the aesthetic and the purity of proportions and forms and lines. That's always, be it William Lyons or Jeff Lawson or Ian Callum or myself, we always respect those rules. We'll always endeavor to do that.
Very, very happy and relieved to hear that. Though, of course, I'm not surprised at all. You mentioned you've just been out driving a little bit. You mentioned it was the Elise, but what's the other car that you drive often?
Well, I'm lucky enough to have two Jaguar SVRs. So I have an F-Type and an F-Pace SVR. So they are, incredibly powerful, very, very fast vehicles.
What color are they, if I may?
The F-Pace is silver and the F-Type is black, and they both have tan interiors. And then I have what else have I been driving? I have a classic Subaru Impreza,
Nice.
RB5, and then I have some weird cars which you're probably not familiar to, because we've grown up in an era of hot hatchbacks in the UK. So I have this Renault Clio Trophy, which is a limited edition car from its time. They're all about year 2000, and then I have a Honda Civic, which I helped design while I was at Lotus, which is a track car. My girlfriend has a Porsche GT3, and then I also have I bought a Ferrari Dino when I was
lovely.
Not too far back in 35 years ago. So I've kept that through the years. I've always had that.
That sounds really special. But you also have bikes in your garage, right? If I remember correctly, I think you have a KTM 1290.
Yeah.
If I remember.
Yeah. No, I've always. I guess since about 10 or 11, I've always ridden dirt bikes.
Yeah.
And I still love riding dirt bikes, and I use the opportunity my job gives me to travel to try and I annoy a lot of my PR support team, and I asked to go dirt bike riding when I go to so I go dirt bike riding. So I've always loved KTM. So I have a KTM 1290 Super Adventure at the moment, and then also have a BMW R9T, a KTM 200 Enduro bike. Then I've got a trials bikes as well. I have a Beta and a Montesa, and then Kawasaki dirt bike, Suzuki dirt bike, Honda dirt bike. Just I forget where I've left them sometimes. I lend them to friends and I can't remember where I've put them. But yeah, dotted around the world, I have different things like that.
I think I have to. I don't know when that's going to happen when I'm traveling to the UK next, but I think I have to come and see some of this the next time I'm there. That sounds really like quite the treasure trove. The R9.
Way of seeing the country, isn't it?
Yeah.
I did a great ride with in Portugal more recently with unfortunately, he was a Paris-Dakar rider, so he was too good for me. But it was a great way to see the country, and I've also ridden in places like Dubai, and in some of the best dirt biking in the world there, and some of those dunes. So it's a great thing, and it's probably when I was younger, I found it more relaxing. But as I get a bit older, I'm a little bit more hesitant, and I'm not quite as confident as I used to be. But I still enjoy it a lot, And now I go riding with my children as well, so they're all at an age where they all ride dirt bikes as well.
That's nice. Good. Yeah, that's really nice. We should try and introduce you to some of the interesting tracks in India too, though. I think driving is probably a little safer than riding here in India.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
you've seen enough of the chaos on our roads to know why I say that.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so a few last things before we wrap up. The current portfolio, it's an unfair question because it's like asking to choose between your children, but a car that stands out for you on what's your favorite design in the current model lineup?
It will always be the sports car. I mean, the sports car should always be the one that draws you to it, because the sports car does represent the best of the brand. It's the ultimate opportunity for the aesthetic and the proportion and the beauty to come alive. So it's always going to be the sports car. So probably it's got to be the F-Type coupe.
Are you happy with the way the facelift has been received? I mean, there's been a lot of positive talk about how the car looks now and almost looks like an all-new model, and yet retains
Yeah.
its character.
Yeah, no, it looks very good. And I think when you see them on the street driving around, they look a lot lower and squatter and more, a nice proportion.
More menacing.
Just by some fairly simple changes.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I remember the first time I saw it, I was a bit surprised because you didn't expect that level of change, and yet when you looked at it, you didn't know that there was that many things that were changed. So
Yeah.
it does come
It's been
across
very
well.
good. Yeah, no, it's been very successful for us.
And the initial hesitation and doubt that was expressed by so many critics and others alike about how when you announced you're going to be doing an SUV, that's all now in the past. You've had a huge success with both those models, and then of course the I-Pace too. Uh,
Yeah.
are you happy what you've been able to achieve, from a design perspective, taking Jaguar into the SUV space and yet retaining everything that people thought that you're throwing out of the window?
Yeah, I mean, they've been very successful. I mean, our SUV products have been our most successful Jaguars in recent years,
Yeah.
and it's becoming more what cars are becoming.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily stop doing this, we're going to do this. They're all generating into a central spot. I think cars. SUVs will have to get lower and more aerodynamic going forward. They're going to have to become more car-like to keep CO2 levels down. And so, they'll start to look much better as a result. I don't want to, I want to make sure there's a good spread of body styles across the Jaguar showroom. Sports cars, I've said, are really, really important. Sedans, I think, are also very, very important. I think it's very important that we do offer alternatives to just SUVs, despite how practical they are and how well they suit people's lifestyles. I think as we get into the future, where we need more efficient vehicles and vehicles with lower drag, I hope we have a resurgence of sedans as well, because they give an opportunity to do very beautiful cars if we do them right.
Yeah, and now with the electrics, again, it sort of opens up perhaps a whole new direction that things could go in terms of trends and what people like. May I ask you what that panel is behind you? I've been very curiously sort of looking at it. The green one on your left.
Oh, that one?
Yes.
Oh, that's a picture of a Lotus Elise, I think.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Because that looks really interesting, and I like the way it's sort of almost.
No, just some prints I did a few years ago.
I was going to say, is this like sketches that you have done, or?
Yeah, just some artwork I did. It's a bit of fun.
It's nice. I like how it looks. The last question then I'm going to sort of ask you is, when it comes to things like going back to, what we would consider the normal living, whether it's music or friends or food, is there something in particular that you're looking forward to, or even a travel destination or meeting someone? You should come to India, of course. That we'll definitely throw in there. But
yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to get your head around international travel again, isn't it? It really seems like such a weird thing to want to do now, doesn't it? But I have a big family in Thailand, and just last Christmas I completed building a house in Thailand, near where my mother lives, in the north of Thailand, Chiang Mai, in the forest, and I really want to get back there. It represents some real escapism, and you miss family now, don't you? I miss seeing my mother. So I would like to get back there. That's what I'd like to do. That's what I'm missing really, and just it's as close as going off the grid as you can get. I know we're off the grid now and forced to be off the grid, but I would really I miss that place at the moment. That's where I'd like to be.
and also some excellent food. The added
Yeah,
bonus.
absolutely.
I am an
Yeah,
absolute sucker for anything if it's Thai. So
yeah,
love that food.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
no, so I hope that
No,
that happens soon because obviously if
yeah,
you are going to be traveling, then it means that things are returning to normal. At this
yeah,
point, nobody knows when and how that's going to happen, but at some point it will happen, and so let's sort of look forward to that optimistically.
yeah,
And
yeah,
speaking of that, I mean, I'm extremely optimistic about everything that will come from you and your team. We can't wait for you to continue to sort of delight us and excite us.
thank you.
It's always a pleasure, and it's wonderful speaking with you today.
Yeah, and you. And all the best to you and all your readers. And I wish you all well and a healthy, good time. And hope you all have a great time, even during this terrible time, and look after yourselves and your families.
Thanks very much. Hope we can meet sometime soon, and maybe this year, if I can at least hope for it, in
Yeah,
case things open up again. But please stay safe. Best wishes to
yeah,
you and the family.
yeah. Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Julian. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Julian Thomson is the design director at Jaguar Cars, and we have had the most fascinating conversation, not just about the cars themselves, but also what they represent. We've spoken also about the importance of how design is not just about how things look, but about how that actually fits into the entire product and the very ethos of what that product is supposed to represent. Eventually, not to the company, not to us here who like to assess these things, but of course to the owners, the buyers who experience these cars, who live with them. Jaguar, in many ways, has always exemplified that, and we're very excited to hear that there are so many things that you can now look forward to when we talk about future Jaguars. They're not just going to be innovative, they're not just going to be possibly electric, but they're also definitely going to be extremely good looking. That's a guarantee we got from Julian. Thank you all so much for watching. It's always a pleasure to have you, and please keep your feedback coming. And we will continue to, of course, bring you more exciting conversations right here on Freewheeling. Thanks very much. Please stay safe. If you must step out, please wear your masks, carry your sanitizers, and always wear your seatbelts. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.